Hello, everybody. It is Friday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for my weekly chat with him by Paul Zeise, our Post-Gazette sports columnist. We're going to be talking about the Steelers' running game. Should they be feeding Jaylen Warren more? Should we be seeing more of some of the other guys in this backfield? Kaleb Johnson, Kenneth Gainwell. How's the offensive line factor into this? How does Arthur Smith's play calling factor into all of it? We're going to dig into that. We're also going to dig into the stakes of the game this weekend against the Bengals at Acrisure Stadium, the rematch of the Thursday night game in which the Steelers defense was kind of cut to ribbons. Can the Steelers get over that hump this week? And if they don't, what does it mean for their season? Excited to talk about all that with Paul. Before we do, just want to remind you the show is presented by FanDuel. And it's also brought to you by Edgar, Snyder & Associates. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment is over? Who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. Insurance company, doctors do. How does that make you feel? If the answer is not great, call Edgar, Snyder & Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They'll fight for the work comp rights you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Paul, Ray Fittipaldo has a story up on postgazette.com today talking about how Mike Tomlin has used his running backs historically, running the wheels off of guys in the past, but opting for more of this committee approach in recent weeks. Ray's not the only one who thinks that they should give Jaylen Warren the ball more. A lot of people are looking at him as their most consistently dangerous offensive weapon right now. I know you've been something of a skeptic of Warren in the past as a lead back, as a piece of this offense. I think you like him as a change of pace kind of guy, but with the way this team is setting up and what he's done this season, has that changed your perspective on him at all and how much he should touch the ball?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that's, I think one of the biggest things, and we'll get to Warren in 1 second, is that we continue to hear that the Steelers and Arthur Smith are like all in on the run game, and this is how they want to build their offense and all that other good stuff. It seems to me like they give up on it quickly. It seems to me like they don't really focus their offense and build their offense around their run game like they should. And I think that is where you start. And then, when you look at Jaylen Warren, again, I think he's a good enough running back and he's fine. But if I'm not mistaken, and I'm looking it up right now, but I'm pretty sure, I mean, he averages as many yards per carry as Gainwell does. And it's not like it's there's some huge difference between him and Gainwell. I think honestly, in general, it's not like when they had Le'Veon Bell and whoever the hell was behind Le'Veon Bell. I mean, I'm looking at it. They both average 4.2 yards per carry. In fact, Gainwell has half as many carries and he's actually scored one more touchdown. And that's not to say that Jaylen Warren isn't a good player. It's just to say that I think that, the issue isn't not feeding Jaylen Warren. I think it's not feeding the run game in general. I think you have to continue to try and run the ball. But I think one of the other problems is they don't run the ball with any kind of creativity, any kind of, element of surprise, any kind of really kind of mixing it up. I mean, it looks to me they've got like about 2, maybe 3 different running plays. And quite often they come out first and second down and they run. And, now they're in 3rd and 8, and then they wonder why they're not, I think they're last in the league in converting 3rd downs. I mean, there's a problem, if you're not going to run the ball at times when they think you might throw it, if you don't have in your arsenal, different running plays, different ways to get the ball to your running backs. I think, Adam, my issue isn't that they're not feeding Jaylen Warren, because, again, I think him and Kenneth Gainwell, if you look at their numbers, very similar players. It's that they're not feeding both of them more than they should, more than they are. And the other part of it is when they are handing it to them, everybody in the stadium and everybody outside the stadium and anybody watching the game knows they're going to run the ball. I mean, there's just nothing to their running game that's that there's an element of surprise or a hint of creativity. That's probably my biggest issue with it.
Yeah, I know we talked about this a little bit on the post-game show, talking about Arthur Smith and the predictable play calling. So we can get into that more in a second. I did want to ask you, what's your view of the decision to move on from Najee Harris in hindsight? Was Warren the right guy in that context? Did they make the right decision to go with him, add Kenneth Gainwell and Kaleb Johnson to this backfield to the point that people now view that as their main strength? Or would you, and let's just assume that Najee Harris stays healthy because obviously he's out for the season in LA, but if Najee Harris is in this backfield, how does that change potentially the Steelers' offense in your eyes?
I mean, I don't know that. I mean, again, I don't know that it changes it much because I just don't think that they're using their running backs the way that they're supposed to use their running backs. And it could be, Adam, a situation of where maybe they viewed Najee Harris as a number one back, right? But there was a lot of games last year where, they gave the ball to Warren seemingly more than they gave it to Najee. So I don't think it would change that much. I didn't have a problem with them moving on from Najee Harris. Just because you can find running backs. I just feel like they probably were kidding themselves when they were trying to make it out that Jaylen Warren was going to be their franchise guy or their main running back. I just don't think that's his role. I think he's a much better complementary running back to, a change of pace guy. And, than he is as sort of the main guy. So if Najee Harris was here, maybe they're trying to run it a little bit more than they would have, but I don't think it would have changed much. I think a big part of the problem is that I just don't think that they've really spent a lot of time trying to really get that running game going. It's almost like they want to get a lead and then they'll see what their running game can do, as opposed to using their running game to try and get a lead.
How does the offensive line factor into the situation for you, Paul? Is it are they inconsistent at times because the line is inconsistent in terms of the running game? Is the offensive line a limiting factor potentially for Arthur Smith, and why maybe some of this play calling isn't where you would like to see it?
I think that honestly, if you look at the offensive line, I think they've actually been better in run blocking in some ways than they have in pass blocking. I think in run blocking they've been okay. I don't think they've been great, but I think they've been okay. The running backs have had some opportunities to make plays. They've either not made them, or they've missed holes, or they've gone in the wrong place. I think Mason McCormick and Zach Frazier are both pretty good at run blocking and road grading or whatever. I think Troy Fautanu, believe it or not, I know he's had some struggles in the pass blocking, but I think that he's actually pretty good in run blocking. There's a number of plays I've seen him isolated where he's cleaning guys out of there. So the offensive line has been inconsistent. There's no question about it. I think it's shown up more in the passing game than it probably has in the running game. But I think that the running game, it's a combination of all of these things. The offensive line needs to just be more consistent. But I think for the most part, they've had stretches where they've blocked well, and the running backs have just not been able to take advantage of the holes that they were given or whatever. And as a result, I think, the whole thing doesn't look right, but then again, you look at it and both of your running backs are averaging more than 4 yards per carry. So again, if you're going to average more than 4 yards per carry, that's pretty standard saying, hey, you're being effective. So it goes back to the original thing of what you asked, Adam, which is they're not utilizing their running game enough. They're not giving the ball enough to their running backs. I know that, I know Ray, isolated on Jaylen Warren. I think that they could give it to both of those guys more because, again, they're both averaging 4.2 yards per carry. That's probably the biggest thing. If you listen to offensive linemen talk and all that good stuff, I'll be honest with you, most of them will tell you they like, as the game goes on, to have more and more running plays. They feel like they get into a rhythm and all that good stuff. So I just feel like, to me, you got to continue to run the football more. And I think your line will get better. I think your running backs will be fine. I think what they're doing is just not quite enough.
On the segment on this, where does Kaleb Johnson fit into that equation for you of wanting to see the running game more? Should he be getting more touches in addition to Gainwell and Warren? Because, listen, we heard a lot of positive things about him, especially within the zone running schemes that Arthur Smith likes to use. And they used, a relatively premium draft pick. He was the second player off the board for them in this year's draft class. So they invested a lot in terms of, can this guy upgrade this team for us now? And granted, it's a third round pick. What are your expectations for a third round pick? I think it can vary, but he was their second pick this year because they didn't have the second round pick. So where does he and where should he factor in to the conversation in your mind?
I don't think he should factor in at all, Adam. I've seen no reason, none. And I'm not trying to be mean, but it's now go time, man. They got to win. They got to win games. They got to put their best guys out there. I know that, he's because he, in his college uniform looked like a Steeler and all this other good stuff. And people, get enamored with these rookies and stuff. I've seen nothing from him that suggests he should get any more carries other than at the end of a game, garbage time. If you want to give the guy a couple of carries, that's fine. But to me, every carry you give to him is a carry you're not giving to one of the two guys that are much, much better than him, and it makes no sense to me. Now, maybe he'll become a good player, Adam. I don't know. But I'm just going to tell you, from what I've seen this year, I see no reason in the world why you should continue to try and get him involved in the game and all that other kind of stuff. He doesn't, he looks like he lacks explosiveness. He's not, I don't think, overly fast to the hole. He's very tentative, and I think part of him being very tentative is, he goes out there with the marching orders, don't fumble and all that other good stuff. He just, to me, looks like a guy who's just not quite good enough. And if he's not quite good enough, it's go time. You got to win now. You can't put him out there. You got to win. I mean, I guess if Jaylen Warren gets banged up a little bit and Kenneth Gainwell, needs a break, okay, you can put him out there for one carry. But to me, I just don't see why you would play him, at all at this point. Now you have to win games. You've got to put your best players out there. I think Kaleb Johnson is he might be a good player at some point. He's not ready yet. He can't help them right now.
We're going to talk about the need to win now. On the other side of this break, we're going to talk about the stakes for the Steelers in this game against the Bengals. Before we do, we want to thank another couple of sponsors. It's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci, Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos attorneys. They've been standing up for victims of mesothelioma and asbestos cancer with over 85 years of experience. Visit them online at sdklaw.com. We also want to thank Olivia Numismatic Rarities. Have you got gold or jewelry collecting dust? Turn it into instant cash safely and securely at Olivia Numismatic Rarities right here in Pittsburgh's Shady Side neighborhood. Gold prices are at historic highs, and ONR pays top dollar for your unwanted gold and silver coins. Stop by their Shady Side Gallery at 5833 Ellsworth Avenue or visit onrcoins.com to learn more. That's onrcoins.com. Call them at 412-900-COIN today. We're back, second segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast on a Friday. I'm Adam Bittner. He's Paul Zeise. We're talking about the game against the Bengals and what it means for the Steelers season. I think this is going to be a pivotal one, Paul, where you are at 5-4 when you look at the teams that they have to play in the back half of this schedule. Our friends at FanDuel have them as 5.5-point favorites this week. I'm not sure we're going to see a spread that favorable to the Steelers for the rest of the season. Maybe against Cleveland, maybe against Miami, but 5.5 might be the biggest number we see, just given that Cincinnati's rolling with a backup quarterback. So is this a must-win game for the division race, Paul? Is it a must-win game to get into the playoffs at all as a wild card team, just seeing how the AFC is developing? Is it a must-win game for both? Or where do you place their playoff chances if they lose this game?
Is it a must-win game? No, they could lose by 100. It doesn't matter because they still have other games to make the playoffs. I think somebody said that this week. Who was? Oh, wait, that was Pitt's coach who said that. No, I think that if they're going to win the division, they have to win this game. Yes, I do. Because I think if they lose this game, who do the Ravens play? They play somebody bad this week. They should win. And now all of a sudden you're tied with the Ravens. And I just don't think that from that point on, if you look at the schedule, I think the Ravens have a little bit more favorable schedule than the Steelers. So you want to maintain that one-game lead, and you want to make sure that you give yourself a cushion because that way it gives you a margin for error. You can split with the Ravens, and you're okay. At the end of the day, if you lose this game, you've got some games that you've got now coming up that are going to be really, kind of difficult. I think at the Bears game, probably before the season, we thought that would probably be an easier game for them. Obviously, it looks like that'll be a tough game. You still got the Bills who, they're floundering a little bit, but they're still the Bills. You've got the Lions. You've got twice against Baltimore. At the end of the day, you've got some tough games coming down. So you cannot lose to Cincinnati on your home field and really expect to give yourself a chance down the stretch. So you look at the Ravens, their next three games are Cleveland, the Jets, and Cincinnati. Then they play the Steelers, then they get Cincinnati again. So, they could get on a run. If you lose this one, you've got the Bears next week in Chicago. It could really go south for you pretty quickly. So this is that. I don't know if you want to say must win because technically they have 7 games left after this one, but this is as close to a must win halfway through the season as there is.
Paul, is the setup better or worse than the last couple of years? I sat down and thought about this. 2023, I think you had the worst team of the past 3 seasons, but it persevered against a relatively manageable schedule in the back half. 2024, I think you had a better team falter against a brutal schedule. This year feels like the best team they've had in the last 3 years, but they're facing a schedule that I think could go either way. I think they could win. I think they can win all of these games. I think they can also lose all of these games. So I have an uncertainty about how I view what they have to do over the next 2 months to get where they want to go.
Yeah, again, I think that's what's going to be interesting about this. We kind of thought every time we kind of think we figured out who the Steelers are, we've realized that we have no idea who they are. So you're absolutely right when you say they could win. We're talking about all the tough games they have to play, but I think they still have a game against the Browns, right? And they still have a game against the Dolphins. Well,
yeah, and I would say this, Paul. I don't view the games against the Bills and the Lions and the Ravens as like nearly automatic losses the way it felt like they were down the stretch last season. Like I think these teams are probably better than them, but I think that they have a better chance to beat those teams this year than last year.
Right. Again, I think that's the thing. They probably will have a chance to win those games, but they could also lose to the Dolphins. They could also lose to the Browns. I don't think they will, but the bottom line is every time we feel like we have figured out this team, every time we think, okay, we know who this team is and what they are, I got to be honest with you, they show us that there's somebody different. So I agree with you. I think the Bills game is winnable. I think the Lions game is winnable. I think, the games against the Ravens are winnable, but I also think they're losable. And so that's what's going to make this, down the stretch so intriguing from that standpoint. It's just going to be, week to week, which we like here because obviously week to week means, we have lots to talk about every week. But I think that's really where they're going to be. It's going to be a team where every single week we kind of don't know what you're going to get. I would assume this week we'll get good, a better version of the Steelers because, they're playing the Bengals who beat them. And, it's kind of an important game for them and all that good stuff. And it's at home. But would it shock you if they came out and laid another egg? No, it probably wouldn't.
Paul, let's talk about this. What does it say about the Steelers' big picture if they lose this game to this team again that does not have Joe Burrow at quarterback at home. Is that the kind of watershed moment that that Steelers fans have been looking for with this coaching staff of, okay, this is the moment where we're like, come on, what are we doing here? Because I think it's going to be, I think we're talking about it as if we think the Steelers are probably going to win, but if they lose, I think there's going to be maybe an all-time level of rage about where this team is going, even if they still make the playoffs. There's gonna be a frustration level of, you can't beat the Bengals once without Joe Burrow. Like, what are we doing here if you can't do that as an organization?
Yeah, I think that's the thing about it is, if there's a loss in this game, I think most people are going to assume it's over, right? Most people are going to assume, wow, they're done. And you're right, there will be a backlash of epic proportions. We're already starting to see some of this, where some of these national guys and these national talking heads who, I call them the Teflon Tomlin apologists, even some of them have started to say, well, like Rich Eisen the other day said, well, maybe it is time for Mike Tomlin to move on. I will say this. And I might have said this on my show, earlier this week, or maybe to you last week. For the first time, I actually see scenarios where Mike Tomlin is not the head coach next year. For the first time, I can actually see one of these Andy Reid, Philadelphia Eagles-like mutual parting of ways type thing. If this turns into another 9-8 season, or, God forbid, 8-9 season, or 9-8, and they lose another, the first round of the playoffs, I could actually see a scenario where the Steelers brass and Mike Tomlin come to the conclusion that maybe, they're better off going their separate ways. And here's one of the things I will tell you. There's this idea that Mike Tomlin is a surefire Hall of Famer, but And maybe he is because of all of his non-losing seasons, but a lot of it has to do with the number of wins he had early in his life, or early in his career, and also his winning percentage. But Adam, if he goes and takes over a job of one of these bad teams, right, and makes it 4 or 5 years and gets fired and doesn't have a winning season, his winning percentage will come down to, a level where I don't know that it's necessarily a lock that he's going to be a Hall of Famer. So he knows he's got it good here. He understands that. And so I feel like it's one of those things where, since he understands that, he's going to do everything in his power to try and stay here. I just think that when you look at the big picture, he's probably a guy who, I don't want to say is coaching for his job, because it's not that. I think he's coaching for, to just sort of maintain the credibility that he has with his bosses enough to the point where, he might get another year.
Well, and I think we saw this at Penn State with James Franklin, Paul, of sometimes you just do have those philosophical games where it does change things. We never thought Penn State would lose to UCLA. Once they did, it changed the whole narrative about James Franklin of, okay, you won the games you're supposed to. And I think Tomlin's been the NFL version of that, right? Like in college football, the threshold for that's way higher, because especially in a place like Penn State, because you're supposed to probably win 10 games a year just based on paper. And he did that for a good chunk of his career at Penn State. I think that 9-8, 10-7 is kind of the bare minimum for Mike Tomlin. But if you lose this game, then you might start to see some cracks in terms of, can they even get to that point that people have been so frustrated about? And if he can't, then I think the voices will get even louder. Paul, let's go finish the show on this. Is there any way the Steelers can impress you in victory? Because I think we've seen games, I think the Colts game is probably the best example, but there have been others early in the season of they win a game and they look great. They look unbeatable to you. I think you can throw the Vikings in there. And then they come right back out and then have a stinker. So let's just say they play their best game of the season on Sunday. Does that change your outlook on this team at all as you look to some of these tougher games later on?
Well, I'll say this. No. And here's why. Because the Bengals defense is horrific. And I think the Steelers defense is really good. So even though they got shredded by the Bengals last time, I think if they come out and play like they did the last 2 weeks, they'll beat up the Bengals offense. And you know what? The Steelers offense will be able to score points. And, even if they score 35 points, in fact, I think they scored 35 last game, didn't they? What was the final score of the last game? They scored a bunch of points against them the last time they played a few weeks ago. So in this game, you know what? No, it probably wouldn't. It probably wouldn't excite me all that much. One way, if they lose, it's bad. But if they win, I guess I would have to see how they win. But even then, I expect their defense to play a lot better than they did, 3 weeks ago, because they've played really well the last 2 weeks. And so it feels like this is a game where if their offense just, plays well, they're going to score 28, 30 points, whatever, 31 points. That's who the Bengals are. What would impress me, I'll tell you what would impress me more, is if they go and win next week on the road against Chicago. That would be impressive. That's when I would say, okay, I'm really to the point where I think this team has a chance. I look at the Colts win, and it was a good win. The Colts had as much to do with that as the Steelers did, and the same thing with New England. So my thing is, I would like to see the Steelers go out to Chicago and just pound the Bears. And if they did that, then I would be really impressed. But I expect them to win this week. The Bengals are a team their defense is so ridiculously bad. The Steelers should be able to score against them. And I don't expect that Jamar Chase and company are going to go running wild like they did last game, because I think the Steelers defensive staff is competent enough to make some adjustments. And I think they're playing better the last 2 weeks as well.
Yeah, you've got Jalen Ramsey at safety now. Presumably, we might see Asante Samuel Jr. in the mix. And does that make them a great defense? I'm not sure, but does it make them a better defense than those 2 weeks against the Packers and Bengals where they were just gutted? You better hope if you're a Steelers fan. So we will continue to monitor all of that. Paul, thanks for joining me this week. If you're just joining us for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. And please check out our written work at post-gazette.com. Paul has a column up over there, so plenty coming at you in that direction. Otherwise, we will talk to you again next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.
Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Paul Zeise, our Post-Gazette sports columnist, to talk about Pitt Notre Dame, the big game down at Acrisure Stadium this weekend. The Panthers hosting College Game Day for the first time in 20 years down on the North Shore. So I'm excited, really excited, Paul. We don't get enough of these college football weekends in Pittsburgh to talk about the local team, but we have one this weekend, so I'm excited to dig into it with you. Before we do, just want to remind you that the show is presented by FanDuel. Paul, Pat Narduzzi created quite the stir this week where he said, no, this isn't a must-win game because it doesn't count in the ACC standings. And that is the path that we want to take toward our goals, is win the ACC. So we can lose this game 103-0 or whatever, and it doesn't change that they could still beat Georgia Tech, Miami, and win the ACC title game and then make it to the college football playoff. I have a lot of problems with those statements. I'm sure you do as well. Chief among them, I think there is still an at-large path here for them. If you beat Notre Dame, if you beat Georgia Tech and Miami and somehow don't get into the ACC title game because of these tiebreakers, you need this win to possibly be an at-large team in the CFP. But beyond that, Paul, I would like to kind of take this angle with the conversation. I think this is a must-win game on a program level, more so than for their college football playoff chances, because you've got the buzz. You've got College game day here. You have, presumably, it's going to be a sellout. There's going to be a lot of Pitt fans. It's the type of game that's going to remind you of those late Big East, teams that you covered when they were able to sell out Acrisure Stadium on their own merit, and there was interest in this program. It's going to be that type of weekend. It's going to evoke that period of Pitt history. So in that sense, I think you've got to remind the people that you're going to get through the door, that you're going to have standing on that lawn in front of the stadium, why college football is great and why it's worth investing your time in, because, we see it in the numbers, Paul. Everything is so Steelers. In pretty much all content we do at postgazette.com, you've got to put a dent in that somehow, and this is an opportunity to do that, is it not?
Well, you threw a bunch at me here. Let's start with Pat Narduzzi. I love Pat. He's a really, really, really good dude. He was obviously very good to my son. So I preface this by saying I love the guy, I respect him, but this was a huge, huge miscue by him. I don't understand these coaches who try so hard to downplay the importance of games as if they're taking pressure off their players, like as if their players don't know how big this game is. I mean, that's one of my biggest pet peeves of these coaches and their paranoia all the time, and this thing they do where we're going to downplay it. Or we've even had, Dave Wanstead, I remember, when they got ranked a few times, was all up in arms about how, we shouldn't be ranked or whatever. He was like worried about expectations. I mean, Pat Narduzzi's entire shtick has always been, the bravado thing. I was shocked that he didn't say, yeah, this is a big game for us. This is really important for us. This is a big-time opponent coming in here. Our fans, that have followed us, and I would even have gone here. I'd have said, hey, we blew it against West Virginia, which was our first kind of rivalry game. Now we've got a chance here, and this game even means more. This is a huge game. I mean, why not try and sell your program and generate hype here? So, like I said, I love Pat, but he made a mistake here. It's one of those things where if you're looking back, he probably wishes he said something different. Because I guarantee you this, there's not a fan out there who isn't somebody who has, complete just delusional fanboyism, who wants to hear their head coach say that a game against, and let's face it, if you look at Notre Dame and Pitt, the history of the two teams, how long they've played, there's a lot of familiarity with them. There's a lot of Notre Dame fans in this area. The Central Catholic connection and all that stuff has a lot to do with the fact that, there are a lot of Notre Dame fans here. At the end of the day, it's a rivalry. Is it a rivalry like, I don't know, like Florida State or, something like that? I don't know if it's quite that, but it is a rivalry in a lot of ways. I mean, these schools have a lot of familiarity. They've got a lot of history together. They've got a lot of history that goes beyond the football aspect in terms of, the people that have run the universities over the years. I don't think any fan who's realistic he wants to hear their head coach try and downplay that game. I just don't. And so especially with everything on the line, as you laid it out, there's actually a chance that Pitt could go win their last three games, get to 10-2, be locked out of the ACC championship game, but still have a chance in an at-large bid. I mean, what are they, 23rd or 22nd or whatever they are, right?
Yeah.
You beat Notre Dame, they probably jumped to about 18 or something, right? Then you beat Georgia Tech, you probably jumped to about 14, 13 maybe, something like that. You finish by beating Miami, maybe you're actually in the top 11, 10 or 11 by then, and all of a sudden you're a legitimate at-large candidate. So, there's that. I know some people were like, well, if they lose this game and then they go on to win the ACC, they could actually be ranked behind the, 5 champions and the group of 5 champions and all that crap. And maybe they win the ACC and they get locked out. I don't believe that had happened. They could lose to Notre Dame. I think they beat Georgia Tech and Miami back-to-back and then go out and win in the ACC championship game against, somebody that's probably going to be ranked. 3 ranked wins in a row. They'll be ranked high enough where they, if they're champions, they'll get into the field. I just think that for all they're trying to do and for what he's trying to do as a program, and let's face it, there have been a number of games where Pitt has had the whole entire country watching them, right? One of those moments where you got everybody watching you, and for the most part, Pitt's fumbled them, Now, I know they beat Clemson the one year, and they beat, Penn State. I guess the year Penn State was, I think, actually won the Big Ten. They've had a couple of moments like that, but you know what? Neither of those games really meant a whole lot. I remember 2003. They had a chance against Miami, if you remember, or sold out Heinz Field. Larry Fitzgerald, Heisman on the line, and they absolutely just messed the bed, right? It was an embarrassment. They got killed. Probably cost Fitzgerald his Heisman. Then, you have a chance the next year. They have a chance in the Fiesta Bowl against undefeated Utah with Urban Meyer coaching them, right? Everybody watching because they want to see if Utah can finish undefeated and then make the case for national champions. I was at the game. It was the Fiesta Bowl. You know what I mean? I was eating Doritos and tortilla chips 5 minutes into the game because it was over, okay? Then a few years later, you have a chance. You're playing against Cincinnati, out at Cincinnati. It's not the game here. It's out at Cincinnati. You have a chance to win the game. All you got to do is win the game. Or the next week, win at Connecticut, and you win the Big East. And you lose to Cincinnati by 7, and then you go up to Connecticut, and you lose a game where I have no idea how they lost the game. They win that game, they win the Big East, they go to the BCS. And then the next year, of course, is the famous Cincinnati game, right? The famous Cincinnati game where everybody watching, you win, you go to the Sugar Bowl, you win the Big East. You're up 21 points on your home field, and you manage to lose the game. So they've had opportunities over the course of time to win, I guess the next moment, my son was on the field. They were at the ACC championship game against Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne in Clemson, but nobody expected them to win that game, and they got destroyed in that game. But then what was it, a year or two later, the Kenny Pickett game, they finally go out and win a big game like that. So Pitt has been sort of a team that disappoints their fans far more often than they don't. And frankly, this is the kind of game, if you win it, it sort of validates your 5-game winning streak. So yes, it's a huge game for them.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, I think it's not so much with your core fans. It's big with getting anyone else in town to pay attention. And you and I are going to pay attention because we love college football. And there's just some people in the region that feel that way, but there's a lot of people that save their football for Sunday, and this is the game you have to win to maybe make them reevaluate things. Paul, let's talk about the game itself. Notre Dame, I believe, is an 11.5-point favorite according to our friends at FanDuel. They're kind of settling into that groove the way they did last year, Paul. Struggle early, and then they're very difficult to beat otherwise, and they're not always super impressive, Notre Dame is. But they get the job done under Marcus Freeman more times than not once they kind of get their feet under them. What chance do you give Pitt in this game against this team? Do you look at that 11.5-point spread and say that's going to be a tall mountain for Pitt to have to climb? Or do you think that Notre Dame is just kind of unimpressive enough that if Pitt plays a good game, they can beat this team?
Yeah, and I've seen the number as high as 12.5, which – I guess I get it because it's Notre Dame and you're trying to, people are going to bet on Notre Dame is how it is. It's one of those teams that people bet just sort of blindly on because they're Notre Dame. But 12.5 seems like a lot of points, Adam, or 11.5 seems like a lot of points, depending on what, obviously at FanDuel it's 11.5. I've seen it as high as 12.5. My point is that seems like a lot of points. Like, I'm not saying that I'm going to lay down a few chocolate chip cookies on this game, but if I were, I would absolutely take those points. Absolutely take plus 11.5 or 12.5. If I could get it at 12.5, I would probably take even more, put even more chocolate chip cookies on it. I'm just saying, like, to me, I give Pitt a really good chance to win this game, and not because I buy a lot of what we've seen over the last 5 weeks because they've played 5 bad teams, but their offense is good. And Notre Dame's defense has gotten a lot better, right? Early on, it was obviously a problem. The first 3 games, they gave up 27 points, and they gave up 41, then they gave up 30. Since then, they haven't given up more than 13. Now, some of that is scheduling. I get it. I'm sorry, they did give up 24 to USC, but some of that is scheduling. But some of that is they've gotten better, as you said, as the season's gone on. And I think that it's one of those games where we're going to get a chance to see just how far Pitt has come, since they made the quarterback change, and obviously their offense has gotten better, but I think their defense has gotten better too. And their defense is going to have to play well in this game because Notre Dame, I think we've got a pretty good quarterback. They run the ball. They've got a really good running back. They've got some great, receivers out there at the skill position. So the one difference in this Notre Dame team, Adam, versus some of the ones that I've seen that come through Heinz Field over the years, I don't know that they are dominant up front on both sides of the ball. That was another game Pitt had a chance to, I remember, so it had been 2003. They played Notre Dame. Notre Dame wasn't that good that year. It was, Larry Fitzgerald year. They played Notre Dame, and Notre Dame came into Heinz Field. It was an ugly game. I want to say it was like 20-10 or something. But Notre Dame up front kicked Pitt's ass on both sides of the ball. It wasn't even close. And at the end of the day, the Notre Dame teams that I've watched that have beaten Pitt, that's generally what happens. They have 5-star guys and 4-star guys at offensive line and on the defensive line, and Pitt has just not been able to handle or contain that. There have been a few games where Pitt's won, obviously. I think that this is a year where Notre Dame's front 7 on defense and their front 5 on offense, I think they're good. I don't think they're elite. And so that's why I give Pitt a real chance in this game.
Paul, excuse me. Paul, you mentioned Mason Heinchel. If they win this game, is he back next year? Because this is the type of, I think, big game environment that, like, this has a chance to be a coming out party. And I think a lot of Pitt fans would say, well, that was the Florida State game. Pitt goes down, beats that program. Whatever it's become under Mike Norvell down there, it's still a big win for Pitt to go on the road and beat Florida State. I would say, yes, we were watching that game. I don't know how much of the country was. You were going to have the country's attention focused on this game. Do you worry if you're Pitt at all? If you win this game, maybe you lose this guy who's been such a spark for you?
You can't worry about that. You know what I mean? You can't worry about that. You got to play to win and then see what happens in the offseason. If a team's going to come get them, they're going to come get them. That's just how it is, Guys that are, play really well, they're going to want to get paid. But, there is some talk that this Mason Heinchel is different and all that other stuff and that he's not going to be motivated by that. I don't know. I think I have a hard time believing, if Pitt's going to offer you $1.5 or $2 million and, LSU comes in and offers you $8 million and you're 19 years old and you got $8 million coming. I'm just saying it could happen. It could happen no matter what. They could lose this weekend. It could still happen. It's just that's a part of the game now that every coach in America is trying to figure out. How do you keep your guys if they play really well? If you don't have the big dollars that some of these other programs have, how do you keep them? There's some talk that he's from Ohio and he's close to home and he loves it at Pitt, and he'll be happy with whatever they pay him. Okay. Will his agent be happy? That's what I want to know. And number two, if he's close to, and I don't even know what's Ohio State's quarterback. What's their? Is he a senior by any chance, or
I think he's a junior. That's what I'm saying. I think he has a year after this.
Okay, well then I was going to say, like, what if Ohio State or Michigan needs a quarterback? You know what I'm saying? And forget about the SEC. All I'm saying is he might get stolen, and if he does, it's a part of it, But I'd much rather him play really well and win the game and worry about the offseason in the offseason.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair. The opportunity to do something special with him is right in front of you. Don't worry about next year. But I think it's a valid question that a lot of people have. Paul, I think the big matchup here is Notre Dame's running game against Pitt's linebacker group. How do you view that specific matchup, and who is that? Is that the matchup of the game? Either Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame are going to run the football really well, or Pitt's going to figure out a way to stop them and have a chance to win this game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously. I mean, look, the linebackers in Narduzzi's defense, their number one task is stopping the run, coming downhill, filling the holes, and stopping the run. So that's really going to be sort of the unstoppable force, whatever you say. That's going to be one of those two things is going to have to give. And probably whatever side wins that battle is probably going to win the game. I mean, if Notre Dame is able to start running the ball and they're starting to, the field's starting to tilt one way and they're able to get downhill a little bit, it's going to be a long, long day for Pitt. By the same token, if Pitt's able to stop them running the football and Notre Dame has to rely on just throwing it all over the field, I'll be honest with you, I kind of like Pitt's chances in that. So that's probably where it is. And I think that is probably the key matchup.
Paul, let's get out of here on this. Backyard Brawl in basketball is Thursday night. Did you have any thoughts on that in this early season for Pitt? What you want to learn about them in a game that the backyard brawl always matters, even if November basketball can sometimes be forgettable.
By the way, as an aside, Adam, I was going to try and hook up Dave Wanstedt this week to talk about the most ridiculous Pitt Notre Dame game, that four overtime game where Pat Bostic. I mean, that game was absolutely ridiculous. But I decided I'm going to wait to have Wanstedt next week because he's on the Bears radio network. So we're going to have him next week to talk about the Steelers and the Bears. So that should be pretty interesting. I just want to put that out there. As for the backyard brawl, here's what I want to see from Pitt, okay? And even West Virginia. I mean, both teams are 3-0. I have no idea how good either team is. West Virginia beat Mount St. Mary's, Campbell. I don't know, what is that, a soup can or something? I don't know who the hell that is. And Lehigh. And then Pitt beat, I think they beat, who did they beat here? Eastern Michigan, I think, is one of the teams they brought in here. Let me look at their schedule. Youngstown State, Longwood, which sounds like a beer, and Eastern Michigan. I mean, I have no idea how good either team is. I'll be honest with you. I think Pitt, they've got some interesting pieces they brought in. They've got some size. They've got the Sayupa kid from Australia who is sort of like a bull in a china shop. They've got some big guys. Obviously, I think, DeMarco Minor, their little point guard is pretty fun to watch. But I have no idea how good they are. And the same thing with West Virginia. And the good thing about this game is at least both teams now are going to be playing against another team that has similar players, similar size, similar athleticism, right? We're going to figure at least a little bit out about one of these two teams and maybe both of them. But for Pitt, they've got such a brand new roster, essentially, with a bunch of guys that, I call them the misfit parts. They're still waiting for the big kid. What's his name? Deshaun Jackson. I think he'll help them a lot under the hoop. But, I mean, Adam, these early games just drive me insane. And I get what Jeff Capel – listen, I get what Jeff Capel did this year with scheduling, okay? You can't blame the guy. I mean, he knows he's on the hot seat. He knows he probably has to win this year. And he better have at least a winning record or, try and get to 20 wins. Well, you do that by loading up your preseason schedule with about 10 or 11 really bad games. I get that. But as far as trying to figure out who they are and what they are, it's hard, to do that just from the standpoint of they play so many of these like cupcake kind of games. So you kind of hope like now they're going to play West Virginia. You really hope that they're able to show that they can step up in class in competition and still be really good.
Yep, we'll be staying tuned for that. We'll also regret that they're not playing the city game again this year, Paul.
Well, it's more important for them to play Longwood Beer.
Yeah, we'll see if the city game returns at any point, but at least you get this rivalry game to enjoy. So big week for Pitt sports. No, go ahead.
Can I ask you one other thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because they do have another rivalry game coming up, and you're a Penn State guy.
Well, that is true.
How are the Knicks this year in basketball? Will that be an interesting game?
I believe they were picked last in the Big Ten, Paul. So, yeah, I think their goal is to make the Big Ten tournament because now you don't do it automatically. You got to be in the top 14. They weren't last year. They missed the Big Ten tournament. So the bar keeps getting lower, Paul, for Penn State basketball. Before it was, can you make the NIT most years? Now you're just trying to make your own conference tournament. So I don't know how much we're going to learn from. We might learn a lot more about Penn State than we will about Pitt in that game. So they got that talented freshman, Caden Mingo. He's been, as advertised, I think he's the highest rated recruit in program history. But again, I've also seen all these videos of Rick Pitino saying, I won't even look at high school kids. So what does it mean that Penn State's getting high school kids now, finally, after
to your Mason Heinzel point, if the kid's good, he's going to be at Kentucky next year.
Exactly. So, Penn State's a great option as a freshman if you can't go to any number of these other schools. I don't know if he's got better options at the end of this year, whether that'll be the case still. But, it's good that they're playing Pitt and Penn State in hoops because especially I liked what they were doing for a while there under Kevin Stallings, Pat Chambers. They played some games over in New York City and Philadelphia and said, we both need to recruit these territories. We both don't have players in our backyard. Why don't we go where the players are and play these games? I wish they would do the creative stuff like that.
Isn't that game in Harrisburg?
It's in Hershey.
Or in Hershey, yeah, in Hershey. Are there players in Hershey there? Hershey, I guess there's a couple of good programs around. Steel High, I think it's still pretty good, and Harrisburg High. But, you're absolutely right. If you're going to play here was my thing, Adam, with that. If you're going to play, not to get off on a tangent, but if you're going to play a neutral site game with Penn State, which is stupid in my mind, just from the standpoint of I think students would like to have that game on campus. But if you're going to move it off campus, like you said, New York City, Philadelphia, D.C., one of those three places is where you're supposed to play that game. But it'd be
really neat if they did the Palestra game that Penn State's been doing the last handful of years in Philadelphia. If they did that as a Pitt-Penn State type of thing, I think that'd be a great environment there. So maybe that'll be in the future. Penn State's kind of been doing that with the Big Ten schools, but it'd be really cool to do it with Pitt, I think. And I think Pitt fans would enjoy that. There's a lot of them out there, Paul. There's a lot of Pitt fans in Philadelphia, so maybe you'd have kind of a 50-50 crowd in a historic venue. I think that'd be really neat, but that's just me. But Paul, we'll keep an eye on the hoops. We'll keep an eye on Pitt, Notre Dame this weekend. We'll talk to you all again in the same space next week. If you're just joining us for the first time on the PG Pitt channel, please hit that subscribe button. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. And check out all of our written coverage this weekend over at post-gazette.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.